Alright, let's go over parallelograms. Here I have a drawn parallelogram A, B, C, D. Okay, it's called a parallelogram because it has two pairs of parallel sides. So this side BC is parallel to AD, and this side AB is parallel to this side CD. Okay, so besides these two pairs of sides being parallel, they're also congruent. So BC is parallel to AD, but also BC is congruent to AD. So these are the same lengths. Okay, AB is parallel to DC, but also AB is congruent to DC. So AB is the same length as DC. Now let's take a look at the angles inside a parallelogram. This angle is congruent to this angle. So the angles that are across from each other are congruent. So also angle B is congruent to angle D. So angle A is congruent to angle C, and angle B is congruent to angle D. So the measure of angle A is congruent to the measure of angle C, and the measure of angle B is congruent to the measure of angle D. Okay, so those are congruent. The other way you could pair the angles is to make them supplementary. So angles that are adjacent or next to each other add up to 180. So the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle D is 180. Likewise, the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B, which is next to it, is 180. And we can do the measure of angle C plus the measure of angle B is 180, and measure of angle C plus the measure of angle D is 180. So if they're across from each other, they're congruent. And if they're next to each other, they add up to 180. Alright, let's look at what happens when we draw the diagonals. So let's draw a diagonal from A to C and from B to D. Okay, the diagonals actually bisect each other. So BD splits AC in half. So this measurement here, the length of this side equals the length of this line segment. So those are congruent. And likewise, AC splits BD in half. So the length of this line segment is going to be the same as length of this line segment. Okay, something else that happens when we draw this diagonal is it affects the angles. So I'm going to extend this diagonal like so in both directions. I'm also going to extend these two sides. So if we just look at these red lines, we see that we have parallel lines. So I'll make this a little bit darker. Here's a parallel line. Here's a parallel line. And it's intersected by this transversal. And we know that there's a relationship that happens with the angles. So we get that this angle is congruent to this angle, and it's congruent to this angle, and congruent to this angle. Well, that's going to give us information about the parallelogram, because if we look, we see that these two angles are actually inside the parallelogram. So we end up with this angle being congruent to this angle. And that's going to happen in all of these areas. So this one's congruent to that one. We'll say this angle, this orange angle, is congruent to this angle. This purple angle is congruent to this angle. And this red angle is congruent to this angle. Because we have a lot of parallel lines intersected by transversals. So these are all alternate interior. This angle and this angle alternate interior in all cases.